Good evening and welcome to Balanced Living. My name is Pastor Chris, and thank you again for joining us for our health portion of Balanced Living. Today we have a very special presentation. We have actually the Currier family who's going to be here presenting the topic on how to have the vegetarian edge. So if you want to hear more about this, want to hear what the benefits are of being vegetarian, we just want to invite you to join in, invite your friends, invite your family members so they don't miss part of this great presentation. We want to remind you that we have the chat box. If you have any comments, any questions along the presentation, please feel free to let us know. Also, if there's anything that we can pray for you, please just click on that prayer request button and we would love to pray for you. So here are Dr. Jim Currier and his wife, BJ Currier, here with the presentation, The Vegetarian Edge.
Good evening. Tonight our topic is the vegetarian edge. We'll be looking this evening at the evidences of why one might consider a vegetarian diet. And we'll be considering different reasons. Many people choose to be a vegetarian for reasons of health, some because of religious convictions. Some choose a vegetarian diet because of concern for animal welfare and the overuse of antibiotics and hormones in the factories that produce animals for food. There's also an environmental concern. It's well documented that the more animals we produce for human food, the harder it is on the environment. And so some people choose to be vegetarians because of environmental concerns. For myself, I have a different reason. I grew up a vegetarian, and so I've never known any other way to live. But as a child and as a youth, I really wasn't a healthy vegetarian. I was a French fries and milkshakes and donuts vegetarian, and that's certainly not the optimal diet. As an adult, my reason has changed, and now it's because of health concerns. As a senior citizen, I find it is better for me to have a quality of life by choosing the optimal lifestyle. Our culture has taken a wrong course and has emphasized the types of foods and lifestyle that increase the risk of chronic diseases. Now, the CDC defines chronic diseases as disease entities that last a year or more. So that this includes many things such as heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, even cancers. And as a cancer doctor, I'm especially concerned at that aspect of our current cultural changes. Chronic diseases in the United States today are ballooning. About 6 in 10 adults today have some sort of chronic disease. 4 in 10 adults have 2 or more different types of chronic diseases. And we figure that roughly 90% of our nation's $3.5 trillion annual health care expenditure is for the care of people with chronic diseases and health conditions. 7 of the top 10 causes of death in our nation today have to do with these chronic diseases. In fact, heart disease, strokes, cancer, and diabetes together account for over half of all deaths in the United States. Over 2/3 of Americans are in the overweight or obese category, which means it is normal in America to be overweight and obese. Do we want to be normal? Diabetes, which is one of the major chronic diseases in America, is a leading cause of kidney failure, lower limb extremity amputations, and a major cause of blindness among adults in the United States. So what are some of the reasons? What are the causes why we see this growing problem of chronic disease in the US today? A lot of it has to do with lifestyle. We, in the American College of, or American Society of Clinical Oncology, over a decade ago, noted that lifestyle was related to over 70% of cancers. And that was when the American obesity epidemic was much less of a problem than it is today. Today, we're seeing that obesity is becoming one of the, if not the major cause of cancer in many nations in the Western world. So what is one of the problems as to, or reasons why we see this growing size of the American population? First of all, we have too much refined sugars in our diet, too many dietary fats, too many animal products, too much sodium, too much supersizing. And by that I mean, the American psyche is that anything bigger is better, right? So a bigger serving size, a bigger size container for our drinks, anything bigger is better. And that has been one of the things that's helped make our size of our population larger. Another is grazing and snacking. Too much of the time we're eating too much of the time. Whereas we ought to go back to eating at mealtime. And then there's too little dietary fiber, which is in whole plant foods. One of the reasons why we've in our nation recommended 5 or more servings of whole plant foods is not because we think it's healthy, but because the average American only ate 3, and we figure it's better to recommend just a little improvement that they might actually do something instead of recommending the whole amount that would be optimal. We have too little of the protective plant nutrients. And in addition to things we eat, Americans have too little exercise. We're too sedentary. We sit around too much. So the journey toward a better life, a healthier life, may be actually closer than you think. As close as your garden or your local produce department. And it's worth noting that even a small shift can lead to large changes in time. So it's valuable to start making changes now, and as the years go by, those changes can be greater and larger. Now, the title is The Vegetarian Edge, and I thought it would be worth considering what's in a name from Shakespeare's play. We use the word vegetarian, but what does that mean? Well, it means different things to different people. Many vegetarians are lacto-ovo-vegetarians, which means that they eat eggs and milk in addition to plants. Some people consider themselves pesco-vegetarians, which means that they eat fish in addition to plants. Flexitarians are those that eat mostly plant foods but occasionally do eat some meats or fish. A vegan is someone who eats only plant foods, whole plant foods. And the exception may be some vegans will also use honey, but in general it's only the plant foods. It's well recognized today in all of the major organizations, major health organizations, that a plant-based diet is optimal, and we encourage people to get most of their calories from plant foods, whole plant foods. And even the American Dietetic Association states that a well-planned vegetarian diet is healthy and beneficial in the prevention and treatment of certain chronic diseases. There was a quote from Harvard Medical School some time ago that said, traditionally research into vegetarianism focused mainly on potential nutritional deficiencies, but in recent years the pendulum has swung the other way, and studies are confirming the health benefits of meat-free eating. Nowadays, plant-based eating is recognized as not only nutritionally sufficient, but also as a way to reduce the risk of many chronic diseases. As such, vegetarian diets are linked to improve weight loss, improved hemoglobin A1C levels. Now, that's a measure of the long-term level of blood sugars. So it gives us a better idea of how a person with diabetes is doing in the long term. It's associated with improved cholesterol, of course, blood sugar control, and also improved insulin sensitivity. Now, that's a way of looking at how effective insulin in our bodies is. We can have the same amount of insulin, but if the cells are not sensitive to the insulin, then it doesn't work properly. Whereas with a vegetarian diet, the insulin is more efficient in allowing sugars to get into our cells. So we don't need as much of it. Studies have shown that type 2 diabetes is up to 2 times lower in vegetarians than in the general population, even when you adjust for body mass index. Now, some of these studies on vegetarian diets are a little difficult because a vegetarian, and especially a vegan, is going to have a lower weight overall. They tend to be thinner. And vegetarians tend to eat more plant foods. So one of the studies from England somehow were able to match people with body mass index and the number of servings of plant foods in vegetarians as well as non-vegetarians, and compared that. They also found that there was an improvement in the people who follow a vegetarian diet. People with a vegetarian diet have improvements in the amount of visceral fat. Their insulin resistance is better. The vegetarians also have a lower risk of cancer, which I'm of course interested in. It also improves mental health. So one of the edges we have as vegetarians is an improvement in our mental health as well as physical health. And we mentioned earlier that diabetes was lower or there was less diabetes in those who are vegetarians, but studies have shown that even in the vegetarian group, if they go all the way to be wholly plant-based, the vegan group, they have an even better risk of diabetes, a lower risk of diabetes. One of the advantages of a vegetarian diet, and especially a vegan diet, is a change in the gut bacteria. And This achieves a decrease in inflammation in the body and lowers the risk of other chronic diseases associated with the improvement in gut bacteria. So what can we do to improve our overall health in choosing a healthy diet? One pleasant thing is to color up your plate. Choose foods of different colors, and you can enjoy many different flavors. It's beautiful as well as tasty. This can lead to improvements in the risk of obesity, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and cancer. God has created a vast array of colorful, flavorful foods with grains, beans, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds for us to savor and enjoy. One of the common questions we get as vegetarians, and I've been asked this many times over the years, where do you get your protein? Have you asked that? Many people have asked that question. Well, it's worth noting that the recommended amount of protein has decreased markedly over the last century. Years ago, it was recommended that we get large amounts of protein, but today the general recommendation is to get about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal weight. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, if you figure a man whose ideal weight is around 165 pounds, that would mean that the recommendation would be about 60 grams of protein. A woman, if her ideal weight is 120 pounds, that would be roughly 44 grams of protein. So that can give you an idea of what is considered the recommended amount. Now, that's not what is necessary, but rather what we recommend people get, which is more than what is necessary in order to allow for people's variation in their needs. So where do we get our protein? Well, one thing is, as we consider that, is to consider where do cows and bulls get their protein? Where do elephants get their protein? Plants, grasses that they eat. We as humans, if we eat all kinds of plant foods, will get all kinds of protein. Just looking at a list of different things. Kidney beans, a half a cup, which is not a very big serving of kidney beans, 7 grams of protein. An ounce of peanuts, 7 grams of protein. A cup of soy milk, 7 grams of protein. A half cup of oats, 5 grams of protein. A half cup of peas or an ounce of hazelnuts is 4 grams of protein. A quarter cup dry of brown rice is 3 grams, and a half cup of corn or a half cup of green beans is 1 gram of protein. We have protein in all kinds of foods. When you look at it in terms of calories, even broccoli is about 30% protein by calorie. There's not a lot of calories in broccoli, so you'd have to eat a lot of it. But the real question is, where do we not get our protein? And that's a little harder if you're eating whole plant foods. The big concern is instead of where do you get your protein, but rather to make sure we don't get too much protein, because Americans suffer from chronic diseases because of too much protein. High protein diets increase the risk of bone disease, and calcium loss, abnormal kidney function, heart disease, liver disease, cancers. All kinds of chronic diseases are related to the excess of protein in the American diet. Now, I'd like to pass off the program to my wife, BJ, and she'll be sharing with you some information on what we can do practical to make changes in our diet and to learn how to enjoy a good vegetarian diet. And I'll clue you in, she knows how to fix a good vegetarian meal. So, BJ.
Hello there. I'm glad to be here to help explain how you can change to a more plant-based diet. What are some easy things that you can do? I want to start off by asking you a question that Jesus asked somebody who was very sick. The man at the pool of Bethesda. You can find this story in John 5. He looked down at this man he had a chronic disease. He'd been sick for 38 years, if I remember right. And Jesus found him there one day, and he looked at the man and he had such compassion on him, and he said, "Would you like to get well?" Now just think about that question. If you're suffering from chronic disease and you knew you could do something about it, would you like to get well? You know, some people actually answer that question with, "No, I'd rather keep my disease and eat the way I please." But you don't have to do that. There are choices that you can make that will improve your health and give you longevity and then a better quality of life while you are living. So let's look at how that happens. Getting started, charting your course. Let's look at the following 7 steps that can help us add color, variety, flavor, fiber, and balanced nutrition to your meals. So, first point, use the plan of addition. You know, a lot of people think that you have to go on a diet and you have to deny yourself. Well, if you're used to certain rich foods and a rich overall diet, it's going to feel like self-denial at first, but consider the man or the woman who's spent their lifetime smoking and has a chronic cough and, gets out of breath easily. Is it self-denial? Is it really taking something away that is worth considering it to be doing with less? Let's think about the process of doing better and achieving better results and adding things to your life rather than dropping things out that you really enjoy. So let's think about this. Adding foods to your diet that are good. One study showed that just adding apples or pears to the diet improved weight loss in women. Now we're going to be talking about this a little bit more in a minute. Jim's going to show you why this happens that way. But think about, what do you like when you go to the grocery store? You know, all the color in the grocery store is in the produce section. It's beautiful, and they have beautiful ways of setting it up. What are some of your favorite foods? Think about what you can grow in a garden. What do you grow? And add more of those things, herbs, vegetables. The big secret to a healthier weight and better habits is to crowd out the other less desirable foods. The foods that are making you sick, the foods that are making you gain weight, and use other foods instead to crowd those out of your life, as I said before. At this point, I'm going to ask Jim to show you how that works. Now, our stomachs have the capacity, now of course it varies from person to person, of about 1 quart of food. And in order to feel satisfied, you have to fill it up to a certain point to know when it's time to quit eating. So we're going to think here for a minute about caloric density, how many calories are in a certain quantity of food. And let's look at that and see how this works.
There are 2 concepts I think are really valuable to note. One is calorie density, Another is nutrient density. And so I've got some different foods here that demonstrate calorie density very well. One is oil. Fats and oils are roughly 14 grams of fat per tablespoon. And what that means is that 4 tablespoons of oil make roughly 500 calories, 480 calories. Carbohydrates, a concentrated carbohydrate on the other hand, has a lower calorie density than fat. And so this corn syrup, it takes 2 tablespoons to have the same number of calories as 1 tablespoon of oil. So 8 tablespoons of corn syrup would be roughly 500 calories. This is a Cornish hen, or was a Cornish hen. I went out to the store and bought it, and I carefully weighed out 500 calories of Cornish hen. And so here you can see a Cornish hen, 500 calories. It's a lot more than 4 tablespoons, so it's a lot less calorie dense than oil, but it's still, if your stomach is about a quart in size, you can see 500 calories doesn't fill it up very well. Well then, I got some mixed vegetables. Guess how many calories are in a 2-pound bag of mixed vegetables? 500 calories. So the calorie density of the mixed vegetables is much lower. You can eat a lot more mixed vegetables than you can Cornish hen and still just get 500 calories. And here we have a high nutrient density compared with these others, with various types of vitamins, minerals, and other plant chemicals that are a benefit for us. Okay, BJ?
So that's one thing I love about eating a plant-based diet, is that I don't feel like I'm depriving myself because I can fill up on foods that are not dense in calories and be satisfied before I've eaten too much. And that satisfaction is a really wonderful thing. Okay, so point number 2, eat more fruits and vegetables. I guess that goes without saying because those are plant-based foods. Aim for at least 2 to 3 cups each of both fruits and vegetables each day. That would be at least 5 servings. Now, what would be 2 to 3 cups of fruits? Well, an apple, a good sized apple would be about a cup, a big banana. So it doesn't really take too much to get that. With vegetables, it's also very easy to do that. Enjoy fresh fruit choices at breakfast and as a replacement for rich desserts. One of the things you could try to incorporate in your life in order to eat a more plant-based diet is to replace your desserts with wonderful fresh fruits. Treat yourself to fruits that you might not normally eat. A lot of people think that produce is really expensive, but that's because they're adding it to what they're already buying at the grocery store. If you cut out some of those other things and replace them with whole foods, you'll find that it's really cheaper to eat a plant-based diet. Choose vegetable soups, beans, and vegetarian entrees. Replace a less healthy main part of your meal with a healthier one. And as you do that, gradually, get moving on it, then you'll find that you're making progress. So you can make these substitutions for less healthy foods like pizza, burgers, and steak. The next point is choose whole grains. Now, a lot of people don't like whole grains. We think, in fact, it's been considered kind of a luxury to have the fine white flour that makes puffy white bread. I remember as a child, my mother was into nutrition. She had a degree in home economics. I don't know if we know what that is anymore, but it included a nutrition component. And she would give us whole wheat bread. And I remember as a child, I used to think it was a treat to have white bread. Didn't realize how it was a cheat instead of a treat, because you lose so much nutrition with the white flour. So if you don't care for the whole grains, look for ways to transition. One of the things I did when switching from white rice to brown rice was to mix the two together. So I didn't get the brown rice, that huge change of taste. I gradually added it to my white rice and increased the quantity, the percentage over time. And now I much prefer brown rice. If you don't like the plain, I don't know what else to call it. I'm sure it has a name, plain brown rice. Try basmati brown rice. Try jasmine brown rice. They're wonderful. They have such a fragrant flavor to them. And you'll find that over time, your taste will adjust and you will like them better. I did the same thing with whole wheat pasta. Now we have lots of choices with whole wheat pasta. And if you don't like it to begin with by itself, mix it with the more refined product, the white pasta. And you'll find that that will work for you. Choose, when you buy a cereal, learn to read labels. Buy a cereal that has no less than 3 grams of fiber per serving, and you'll find that there aren't a lot of those. The people who are boxing cereal for us and selling it to us aren't real concerned about our overall nutrition. You're going to have to take that responsibility. So start reading the labels. Choose cereals that have at least the 3 grams of fiber per serving. So let's go on to the fourth thing that we can do to transition to a plant-based diet. Eat more beans, more legumes. Legumes are things like beans, including split peas, garbanzos, pinto beans, kidney beans, lentils. There's so many different kinds. And some people have trouble with adding beans to their diet, that it produces excess gas. I have found that there are some beans that I have more problems with than others. So if you have problems when you add beans to your diet, try a different bean. And you may find that you have several that are just fine and that don't really bother you at all. Try adding beans to foods you already enjoy, like salad. One of my favorite beans to add to a salad, and you often see them on salad bars, is the garbanzos. You can also add beans to soups, to pasta dishes, lots of ways to use beans. One of the things we like at our house is hummus. Hummus is very easy to make. It just has a very few ingredients. You can buy it already made, but we prefer to make our own. We like it better. It's fresher and has just the things in it that we like. We use hummus. One of our favorite ways is over baked potato. You're adding beans to your diet, and you're replacing a less healthful topping, like the butter and the cheese and the sour cream, with something that's a whole food and that tastes wonderful. It's also good, we also like hummus with broccoli, really good topping for broccoli, greens, things like that. You can make it in sandwiches, put it on a piece of bread and add vegetables to that, and it's really good that way. Beans help reduce weight, fill you up, keep you full longer, help to balance your blood sugar because of their high fiber content. They're one of the very highest of the vegetable kingdom in terms of fiber. Because of their high fiber content, they're also helpful in lowering cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure. Number 5, enjoy healthy fats. Jim showed you the olive oil, and if you're going to use an oil, I choose to use an olive oil because it can be a very simple process to make it. But of course, the calories are very dense, and so you want to minimize the fats that you do have in your diet. But what are healthy fats? That would be things like nuts, seeds, and there are quite a few of those, of course, all the nuts that you can think of. But just remember that nuts are also high in fat. Now, they've got all kinds of other wonderful nutrition in them because they're a whole food. But the recommendation is for a handful. And, you know, it's really easy for nuts to get a hold of you, and you can sit with a can of salted nuts, maybe roasted in oil, and you can pack on a lot of calories in a short time. They're good for you, but more is not better. You have to treat them with respect. So, avocados, another food that has good fat in it, nuts and seeds, and these have healthy fats that can be used in salads and in sandwiches. There are also flaxseed, chia seed, those are popular seeds right now. Sunflower seeds. We talked about adding beans to salad. Roasted sunflower seeds to me are just wonderful on a salad, and as well as other roasted nuts. Number 6, consider vegetarian entrees. Grocery stores may offer actually frozen vegetarian entrees. And these are good transition foods. I'm not sure I would stay there the rest of my life, but if you want something that to transition from animal protein to a more plant-based diet, there are products like tasty burgers made out of tofu or soy or black beans. You'll find some of those in the freezer section. Burger crumbles, and even something that's like sausage. But remember that these are generally highly processed foods, and so use them more as transition. Check the labels again, look for sodium content, look for the fat amount in these products because it's often quite high. So make smart choices when you look at these kinds of foods. All right. Then explore vegetarian cookbooks. And now with the internet, we have a wealth of information right at our fingertips. You've got a squash you've never eaten before. You know, be creative. Go to the store, buy something that you've never tried. Get on the internet and find out how to fix it. I've done this with a lot of different foods, and you can even specify what you want, like low salt plant-based foods, low salt vegan, or no oil vegan, and you'll be amazed at what you can find. There are many vegan cookbooks, vegetarian cookbooks that provide easy plant-based recipes using whole grains, beans, pasta, potatoes, and tofu. If you're at a potluck and you taste a main dish that happens to be vegetarian, track down the person that made them and ask them for the recipe. Most people are very complimented by that. If you find a recipe that is overall pretty good, but it's just not quite right, you're the master of the recipe in the end. I try to make the recipe the way it reads the first time, but I think, wow, that's too much salt. Well, then make a note of that. The next time you make it, add less. So if it uses a seasoning you don't care for, we'll try different seasonings. And that way you can begin to learn to modify your foods to your taste and to better health. Then we want to eat smart. And here's where you need to think about some cutting out things. One of the points I want to make is that cutting, and just re-emphasize, is that cutting out less healthy foods is not something to grieve over. I remember there was a particular food that had a hold on my life. I won't tell you what it is. And I decided that it was too much in control of me. And so I cut it out, and I decided, okay, I'm just done with that. And I discovered that when I would go to meals where there were a selection of desserts, that the only ones I wanted were the ones that had my favorite food in them. But realize that it's not depriving yourself to say, no, I'm choosing something healthier, because the benefits you get will be worth the effort for sure. Something simple you can do, and I tell people this who want to lose weight. I read one time that Americans typically drink 20% of their calories in the form of course, beverages. And if the only change you make right away is to substitute water for these other beverages that have basically empty calories in them, you'll find a great advantage that way. Now, some people are concerned about, am I going to get all the nutrients I need in a plant-based diet? There is one nutrient that you need to be especially mindful of, and that is vitamin B12. Typically, plant foods do not have adequate quantities of B12. It's theorized that in times past, when we weren't so sanitary in our washing of our vegetables from the garden, we still would have some of the dirt that had the bacteria in it that helps us to produce vitamin B12. Now with our foods so scrupulously cleaned, we need to be mindful of B12 and to find products that are either fortified with B12, like cereals, vegetarian foods. Some of the non-dairy milks are fortified with vitamin B12, or just take a supplement on a periodically. Vitamin D is very essential. The best way to get it, of course, is out in the sun. But if you find that your vitamin D levels are too low, you may need to consider supplementing it that way. So a healthy diet means cutting down on sweets, cutting down on processed foods, soft drinks, fried foods, and constant eating. It's so easy to get into that habit. I know in college I did, and pounds started to go on. And I found it was difficult at first to get off, to change that habit of eating whenever I felt like it. But you will find that over time, if you're very strict with yourself, that those cravings between meals will not happen nearly as often. And on a plant-based diet, with the fiber, the increased fiber in your diet, you'll find that your meals last longer and you're not hungry in between meals. You don't have that letdown that you do with the more refined foods. Another couple of points I wanted to make here is with your water, make sure that you're getting plenty of water. It's a wonderful beverage. Aim for that 8 glasses a day. Enjoy a healthy breakfast. Make exercise a part of your daily routine. And another thing that some people have done, and that is to do a kitchen purging, a cupboard purging. There are food banks that will take your unhealthy foods, and if you don't want to do that, you have the permission to pitch them. I've done that on occasion. I always feel just a little uncomfortable about it, but I'd rather it be in the trash can than in my body. A trick that works for me, and you may have heard this before, is if you don't bring it home from the store, you won't eat it at home. And sometimes just the unavailability, you'll get these cravings, but you'll find that if it's not there, you can make it, because the cravings will disappear. So the Bible has some wonderful things to tell us about why this is important. Besides, I'll have to confess, my reasons for moving in a healthier direction in diet were somewhat selfish. I wanted to feel better. I wanted to address some health issues in my life. But there's another component that is perhaps even more important. The Bible says in Psalm 139:14 that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, a marvelous work of God. By following the natural laws that God has placed in us, He created our bodies. He designed the fuel that we run best on. So by following those natural laws that are built into our bodies, we will find that we can reduce sickness. You know, how many of us feel like serving others when we're feeling lousy? So feeling better gives us more opportunity to be of service for God. This is a very potent verse, 1 Corinthians 6:19. Don't you know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit which is in you, which you have from God? You're not your own. Have you ever said, it's my body, I'll do what I want with it? Well, according to the Bible, that's not true. God has given us this body as a temple for his dwelling. He wants to live in us. And if we pollute that temple, what are we saying to our Maker? You know, how do you like it when someone comes to visit in your home and their kids run around and pull things off the shelves and make a huge mess and leave, and then you clean it up? We're not real happy with that when that happens. We are accountable to God for the way in which we care for our bodies. You know, think of a nice, big, beautiful diesel truck. A former pastor of ours had one of those, and he was bringing a load home from an eBay sale. It was evening. He had his 4 children with him. Mommy was at work. And he stopped. He was getting low on gas, so he stopped at the gas station. And he took the green pump handle and he filled up his truck, not knowing that at that gas station, the green pump handle was not diesel, it was gasoline. You know what happened? He didn't get very far down the road. The engine failed. The system didn't work because he was using the wrong fuel in it. It was a costly mistake, and that's what happens to us when we put the wrong fuel in our bodies. You know, you don't put water in a gasoline engine. You know how that goes. You don't need to belabor that. You know, the last verse we looked at, the verse before this, said that we're not our own. And think about this, you were bought with a price, the price of the life of the Son of God. That makes our bodies and our minds his, and we have the privilege of honoring him. As the verse says, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. So here are some links that may be helpful to you in finding motivation and also resources for beginning a healthier life. The first one is chiphealth.org. This website has to do with programs that teach people how to and why a healthy lifestyle is beneficial. And there's a lot of good motivation there. Another one that my husband and I go to regularly is nutritionfacts.org. And I would particularly point you to a presentation by Dr. Greger called How Not to Die. He's got a book by that same title. If you need some motivation, maybe you're not suffering from chronic disease now, but you'd certainly like to avoid them. Your dad died of heart disease, your mom has diabetes, that's my case. And you'd like to avoid those things, check those out and find a good way to go. So, you can do it. Many have done it before. It's interesting to me, my husband and I have been involved in various health programs, and we'll have people come in kind of with their arms crossed and saying, I could never do this. But you know, when you learn how God designed us and what the fuel is best, which fuel is best for our bodies, you'll find that when you take a step in that direction, that God will come behind you and encourage you and reward you for those decisions. And as you move along, you will find that you have better energy, your weight will come off without big efforts, without dieting. When you fix the cause of the disease, you don't have to diet. You know, if soft drinks are causing you to gain weight, if you put those aside just forever, you don't have to deal with it anymore. So I would encourage you that this is a good way to go, to put more plant foods in your diet, to remove those things that are harmful and that are causing disease, and commit yourself to following God's leading and to making steady progress in this plan. And I would like to encourage you to commit that to God. Let's pray and ask for his help in that. Father in heaven, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We're still learning how wonderfully made we are. There's so many things about the human system that science still doesn't understand. It's such a work of art, such an awesome thing that you have done in creating us. I pray that you'll give us the priority for serving you in our bodies as well as in our minds, knowing that the two are connected and they have relationship to each other. And I pray that you'll strengthen our will, that you'll motivate us, and that you will shine your light through us to honor you in the earth and to be of better service in making known to others your goodness and your coming kingdom. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.